But often consultancies come in with giving you the surefire answers, and we trust or we follow them either because we're too scared ourselves to take the initiative. It's easier, and if it goes wrong, we've got somebody to blame. I've often been in a situation in my consultancy where I've realized you're being set up for that blame game, because the responsibility's just been given to you to implement. And you say, no, I'm not prepared to accept that. I'll help you think through. I'll help you frame questions. We'll provide a framework, but you've got to take responsibility. So again, isn't that a great quote by Hoffa? And again, it's simply that if our learning isn't updated, we find ourselves equipped to live in a world that doesn't exist.
Hi, Tom. I know it's your first day, but we could really use your help.
Yeah.
Thanks. We're just in a bit of a jam. All this has to get out today.
Yeah. I don't do shipping.
Oh, no. It's very easy. We use FedEx.com. Anybody can do it.
You don't understand. I have an MBA.
Oh, you have an MBA?
Yeah.
In that case, I'll have to show you how to do it.
Shipping so fast and easy, even an MBA can do it. Relax, it's FedEx.
I think what that gets at is that we need to be willing to challenge some of our own methodologies to learning, and learning has changed. And one of the implications of information, of generations coming through who know how to use this information, it's like water to a fish, and you're going to look at generational theory further down this journey, is that some of our current models around learning are under massive threat. The next generation will not sit for 2 days in a room like this listening to a talking head. They want to be able to access learning where they are, wherever they are, when they want, how they want. And that's a massive threat to business schools. And one of the biggest challenges, and here's the irony, business schools who are leading the way in leadership development are themselves entrenched in a model that is maybe archaic. But breaking up that model is difficult because they're very, very successful models. They bring in a lot of money to the underpinning universities. But the model itself needs to be challenged. And so again, what will learning look like in the future? How does it engage? And it starts in a room like this with the kind of conversations that we're having. A couple of years ago, I was doing some work in China, and I was it was in Shanghai. I was at a conference on leadership that I was also part of, and there was a Chinese academic who was part of the speaking entourage who spent 2 hours sharing that formula as to leadership development. Now, you probably want to get that down because that's worth its weight in gold. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. I think he thought that my enthusiastic note-taking was because I was funny. I didn't want to miss any of it because I wanted to portray this. But think about this. He spent 2 hours explaining this formula as the secret to developing people and leaders. How many of us parent like that? We don't parent like that. Where on earth does this rubbish come from in our corporates? And I've seen it in talent management programs. I've seen it in underpinning leadership programs. Maybe not as elaborate as that, but the same kind of, it comes from an industrial age context where we said if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. And whilst that is very relevant and applicable to operational sides of businesses, we then took and applied it to people. And we've gone overboard, partly because we felt we need to justify it. No, I'm not saying measurement isn't important. You do want to measure progress. How do you measure an adaptive challenge? Hartridge says you measure it by, are we making progress? That's your only measure. Am where I am today, is it making progress from where I was? Very difficult, but because of the pressure that is put on us, because of an industrial aged wisdom that has been inherent in our systems, we apply that to people development. Let me explain a little bit of a context, and here's another framework. It's Ralph Jensen's work in The Dream Society. Again, a good book to read. Very simplistic, I know. This would never satisfy academics, but it will be helpful. He looks at successive economies. Let me get something that's a bit... Ralph Jensen, The Dream Society. He looks at a whole succession of economies that we've passed through and asks what was the competitive advantage in that context. In the hunter-gatherer context, competitive advantage was forged by focus. Those tribes who had a sharper sense of focus, what are we going to eat today, where are we going to sleep tonight, who did that better than other tribes, created a competitive advantage for themselves. The real interesting thing in this model is not so much in what I'm saying now, but for me the real interest is in what caused the change, what changed the rules of the game. They always were technology based, but let's not get distracted. The rules of the game changed and we went into what was called an agrarian society. In this context, you needed focus, but that was necessary but no longer sufficient for competitive advantage. How did you create competitive advantage in an agrarian economy? Well, it was by looking after your chief asset better than anyone else. And your chief asset was your land, and we know from our history lessons, those who cottoned on to subsistence farming created a competitive advantage. The rules of the game changed again, and this is when it gets interesting. In a period that becomes familiar, and we entered the industrial economy, the industrial revolution. Here you needed focus, you needed to guard your chief asset. They were entry to the game. What created a competitive advantage? Business efficiency. And of course, the well-known case study in this is the auto industry. Henry Ford, concerned around the urbanization that was taking place in America, wanted to create a product that was affordable for every American family to have access to, that would allow them to go and explore the countryside. And the Model T was built on the back of that vision. His famous statement around the Model T was this: you can have any Model T so long as it's black. Why? But what was it, you're right, what was it about the efficiency of black Model Ts? I'm looking for a specific, just for interest, but you're right, it was an efficiency-driven logic, but why black? Why not green? Why not red?
I just wanted to make one colour. So
Yeah? Why not green though?
Yeah, but why the black?
Yeah. You're right, business efficiency, one color production line, but why black?
Didn't show the dirt.
That's, no. Black paint dries quicker. And in a world, it absorbs more light. In a world where every second counts because it's around business efficiency, that's a factor, a small factor, but a factor. They took down the manufacture of Model Ts from days to mere hours by paying attention to those kind of things. Frederick Taylor, in this context, was the first to start bringing management theory to the fore. And Frederick Taylor's approach was, let's look at production lines, let's measure it, and let's create greater efficiencies. Here's the thing. I still know companies today who think that in today's context, competitive advantage is to be found in business efficiency. It's not. Let me suggest this. If you're not efficient, you're not in the game. So again, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying you can ignore it and be wasteful, but it's a health factor. It's a hygiene factor. That is not where the forefront of competitive advantage is to be found. You're expected to be efficient, and if you're not in the game. So just to complete the model, in about the 50s, Jensen argues we moved to what was called an information-based economy. And your competitive advantage here was how well you got information, extracted it from your system and used it. Here's where the banking world is in crisis. The banking world, in a world of efficiency, siloed themselves. Private bank, personal, car loans, car fine, blah, 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 because that was an efficient way to do it. They are now working in a world that is integrated, with a generation who are integrated. So you know what it's like. You've banked with your bank for 20 years. You walk in wanting a new service or product, and they ask you for the same information you've given them 300 times before. Mobile phone numbers, address, etc. Why? Because their systems don't speak to each other. And if you're wanting this product or this service, you've got to reformat all that. And you've got a generation coming through who largely are intolerant of that. I expect you to see me as an integrated whole. And the way business intelligence is now being formulated is putting efficiencies and silos under huge pressure. When I was last in London, I heard a top guy from Oracle speak about the next generation of business intelligence. Quite honestly, it was scary. Current searchers go and look in silos, depending on your search criteria, to extract and bring you the information. They're talking about random searches. No matter what your search criteria is, and no matter how ridiculous your search criteria is, they will get you random business intelligence. I mean, what that's going to mean for organizations going forward is massive, and I know you'll focus more on that in future blocks in this program around technology. But business intelligence, how we manage, how we get information, is nuanced by generational approaches to this. My generation, I keep the information to myself because that gives me power. The next generation, the more you dissipate information, the more it is. So think about a simple, silly little example around Facebook. My generation, if they do go on Facebook, present the best side to themselves. My left side's better. I'm going to put a picture on that makes me look 10 years younger, and I craft very carefully what I put out on Facebook. That's the boomer approach to Facebook. Kids today, they put out anything, hanging out the window, half drunk, half naked, and you look at that as a parent, you say, oh my gosh, how can you be doing that? You can't. But it's an attitude around information. They look at my approach to that and they say, what are you hiding? What are you guarding? This is about transparency. I look at their transparency, I say, no, it's not cover up, stop, It's just a generational paradox around information transparency. And these are hard dilemmas in business, but we've got to be framing them in order to have intelligent discussion. Lastly, Jensen argues that we're moving into what he calls the connection economy. I've seen it written up as the relational economy, the experience economy. Doesn't matter what you call it. The rules for competitive advantage are shifting to how well you connect with people inside and outside of your business. We talked earlier about the war for talent. What is the war for talent? The war for talent is around connectivity. How well we connect with a different generation, essentially. So, again, very simplistic. I understand that. We could debate it if we go deeper. It's a framework that helps us understand competitive advantage and shifts that are happening. And I'm really concerned with people who still propose this kind of approach to development, because I don't think it's working any longer. And we have taken this. I sat in a big company the other day. They asked me to review their talent management process. They had a group it was a HR team of about 30 people. 5 of them had spent about 8 months working on it, researching, working. They produced a framework that after about the 5th slide, there was nobody else in the room who hadn't been involved in the architecture of it, who understood what was going on. It looked like the design of a spaceship. It was incomprehensible. And I just, I want to step back and say, don't you see what you're doing here? We've lost the ability to go up to somebody and say, let's have a cup of coffee. What can I do to keep you here for the next 5 years? Now, I know it's not as simple as that, but we've hid behind these metrics and behind these formulas that meant we have stopped having authentic conversations. And that becomes the challenge. How do we get the best of both? Because at one level, I understand this is important, but we need to think differently. And this has been applied to leadership. Toffler, you might have come across that book. It's regarded as a classic. It was in 1972 he wrote it. If you read it today, it's still relevant. It's an amazing book from an amazing intellect. And I love the quote that he says. It's the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. So here's a great strategic question for you. As a team, as a business, as a department, whatever your framework is, what are you learning right now? Come back to my question to the CEO. What are you learning? I normally get a blank stare. CEOs don't learn. We've learnt. We're not learning. What are you unlearning? And what are you relearning?